Hello and welcome to our daily sketching routine. It is Tuesday, October 29th, 2024. I'm going to say that today's topic is finishing page 2. So yeah, I'm going to finish, this is page 2 right here of my mini comic that if you watch some of the previous videos, you'll see the progress, how it came to be. But first, if you're returning, welcome back. If you're new, I sketch and post every day, and I set a 5-minute timer. Which I'll go ahead and do, and that's for the sake of the routine, the daily sketching routine. However, I'm really not going to think too much about how long this takes because I do want to finish this page. And so with that in mind, what I did was I scanned the first page, which I'll post some links if you're curious how this came to be. And so yeah, this is the first page just for reference, and this page isn't really finished, so to speak, but I feel like it's finished enough for like a mini comic. Like, I was calling it a test comic because I haven't drawn comics in a really long time and I've never really completed one, so I decided, so this was going to be maybe a 4-pager, but I'm going to go with 3 pages and we'll talk about that because sometimes you reach a point where you have to complete the work, and there's a kind of a mindset for that, and that's what I'm going to focus on today. And that's what today will be about. So yeah, I'll use this as just so you can kind of see. It looks cool to me. So I printed this out, and I mean, I think it prints out pretty well. It's a good prototype. I think it's a good test of like the style and stuff. But yeah, I mean, it'll look better and it'll go smoother, which I'll talk about that too, sort of what I've learned from it. But I'll use this as reference. Let's set it to the side. But basically, my goal is to get this page to look like that one, as complete as that one, and that'll be pretty good. And there's another stage to it, which is to scan it in, which is what I did, and just kind of clean up the page and stuff. But again, I'm just using this as a test and prototype and to see a possible like process. But speaking of that, looking for the thumbnails so I made a video about this and came up with a quick thumbnail of the 3rd page, and I was thinking there would be a 4th page, but I'm not even gonna mess with it. Yeah, so this is the 3rd page, and I'm gonna change the process a bit. So what I did was, I'm still keeping it in the sketchbook, but I went ahead and just laid out the panel, and I'll do my layouts in pencil, and you'll see, I'll do another video about that, but you'll see what I mean by layouts. And I think it'll be a good combination of, see, this one I didn't lay anything out, I didn't have any thumbnails, and in the second one I actually did, and by layout I just mean I just drew it. And or not having layouts. And then in the second page, which is the one that I'm working on, I did lay it out in the sense that I sketched out, but in pen, and kind of saw sort of where I got stuck. And then in this one, I'm gonna lay it out in pencil, but not detail it, because I just think a lot of this has to do with my like experimenting with the style I'm going for and like the feel of the comic. So let's begin. So yesterday's video was about, I called it doodling, scribbling, and sketching, and it's the same. That's the point of that, was to be able to start work, like not just a blank page, but also a page like this where it's not finished, can be in itself like daunting. So I had already seen that. That's 5 minutes. I'll start another one, but like I said, I'm just gonna keep on trucking. So I'd already seen that I wanted to work on this for foot here. And so yeah, I'm gonna kind of scribble in, sketch in, if you don't want to use the word scribble, some shadow and stuff, texture. So that's why I wanted to do that yesterday's video, was to kind of, because now that we are, or that I'm in a stage where I can say, okay, I'm gonna finish this page like in this drawing session, then it's a different mindset. So some of the different mindset is deliberateness. You have to be in a flow state and you have to be focused. So if those things aren't there, then you're probably not going to be able to finish it, or you might create more work for yourself. So that's something to keep in mind. And that just comes from practice, where you understand sort of the stumbling blocks. And so hopefully, I was thinking how it's probably best to view these videos as workshops. I mean, I have several different kinds of videos that I'm going for, and this kind of thing is more of a workshop and not so much a class. I don't think I'm ever gonna do a class of anything. I was a good student, but I'd skip class all the time. I'm not the best at that kind of example, because it was boring. It wasn't that I didn't like learning. It was boring. So that's one reason that these aren't classes. I mean, they're boring. That classes are boring, but they're workshops. I like to work, especially if it's something that I care about. So if you have a project that you care about, doesn't have to be art, but most likely it would be, then this is the place to be. Yeah, I worked on her pose. This is all from imagination, by the way. I just kind of figured it out, and even if it's not perfect, it's okay, because just do your best. I'd rather see someone draw something to the best of their ability than like a drawing that's boring, or a comic that's boring. So right now I'm just kind of getting warmed up. I'm getting into the page, because when you're at this point where so what I've done is basically I've cleared the desk. So I've cleared my desk, and I'm just using the pen that I'm using, which is the medium pen, whichever pen that you're using. it's kind of the same with if you're doing a layout. Like I said, I'm going to do a layout in pencil, and then it's good to just see how like I'm turning the page and everything, or rotating the page. Then it's good to like focus on the tool that you're using, focus on the work that you're doing. When you get to this point, there's that kind of ugly in between stage, but once you get to this point, I mean, you pretty much know, okay, well, this is what I'm gonna do. And basically you just now I was gonna say, basically you just work on it until you like reach a certain level of completion. But I normally would just put on some music or headphones and just kind of jam out at this point, because I already know like how it's gonna look. But I also don't mind speaking, since now I have a channel. It's been 5 minutes. I started another timer. So it seems like at this point, the longest videos on my channel are about 40 minutes is kind of the longest. This may be even longer. So just as far as the tools I'm using, then I'm not sure why I said that, but it's because my mind is going faster than my mouth, what I'm speaking. Yeah, the tools I'm using, so this is like the predominant, like what I'm using to sketch with. And then the other is a fine liner, and then also a brush pen. And I would say that most of the time I want to sketch with this one, just for like the consistency of the page, of the look. And then kind of use the brush and like the fine liner to balance out. And part of that was created by the look of this page. And so you kind of want it to be the composition, and that's kind of another topic that I could talk about, is sort of the composition of not just the one page, but like, I mean, if this were a comic, I mean, this would be front of it, and then you flip this over, and that would be on the back. It might be different if that were digital. It would be more like the next page. But the point is that it should still visually look good. The design of it, the composition of it. So for example, I like kind of just leaving this more open. So it's best to use this sparingly and then go in. And it's the same with the fine liner, where it would be easy to kind of just use the fine liner everywhere, but then it kind of grays everything out, because it's all about like the eye flow and the focus. So yeah, some of what I'm saying will be based upon what I'm working on, like what I'm drawing, but some of it might just be what pops into my mind. It might be a little bit rambly. But I did want to talk about that, because like I personally, like I want videos, I want people to produce videos that I can just listen to. But I really haven't found that much. I used to listen to like podcasts, and I mean, kind of the problem, of course, is that there's a lot. So there's that. So sometimes stuff that you would like just kind of gets lost in the crowd. And so yeah, there's that. I mean, you can't really do anything about that, because sometimes the stuff that gets promoted isn't really interesting to me. So I get that there's stuff that I might be interested in that I'm just not gonna see. So I understand that my stuff is kind of like that, where I could see how, because in my mind, sort of the ideal viewer or listener is going to be, I need a brush pen here. But yeah, like my ideal listener is just basically what I would like, or what I feel I want to find. I want to, wherever it went. It's that whole thing of never being able to find the one color you're looking for. So that's 5 minutes. I'll start another one. And the thing is, right now I'm not listening to something else. However, there are times where, like, the rest of the time I'm not recording a video, so I do want something to listen to. And I mean, it depends on mood. I mean, I understand that you don't always want to hear about shop talk, as I call it, like how to do art. But then there's also just talking about stuff you're passionate about, and that's kind of fun to listen to. But just going back to talking about comics, yeah, I actually have not drawn that many comics, although in my video about my RPG origins, I mentioned that I actually got into comics before role-playing games. So yeah, I've always been into it, and I used to have this pretty big collection of comics, like thousands, like organized and everything. But then I had to get rid of all that, which is the thing to forget, the trauma. But yeah, I haven't really drawn it that much, and also I haven't like completed like a comic, even a mini comic. I think the most I've actually drawn is maybe 3 pages, but like it was supposed to be a full comic, and so it wasn't complete. So that's why I want to just say that this is a 3-pager and leave it at that. So yeah, like right now I'm just kind of doing what I was talking about yesterday, where I'll sketch stuff in, I'll scribble stuff in, I'll kind of like doodle, but then keeping in mind that there's things on this page that is basically complete, and so not messing with it. And that's kind of another thing to keep in mind when you're reaching the final stages of something, of the piece, the art page or piece or illustration, is that you don't want to mess up what's good about it. So I played around with like I did the border a little bit thicker right here, and in fact I wanted to put, well, I would put a border around, it looks like so I didn't put a border around the whole page here, but I probably would maybe on the computer, but I did on the other one. And I would probably do, I'm not going to do the third page on a separate piece of paper, but I probably would do it that way. I would just kind of create a template and print it out, at least for like the border, and then just use a different, have it be loose and have a separate notebook or like a separate folder for the pages. So again, I'm just using this as a guide to like how far I want to take this page. And even if you focus for, like I said, the longest video I have on my channel is probably around 40 minutes, which is, I might have 2 or 3 of those. And like the last one was the RPG origin story. Even if you just focus for like a good 40 minutes, you'll probably get pretty far, but that's only if you know what you're doing. Because I have also spent time, just maybe days, certainly hours, but yeah, even days. So that's 5 minutes. I'll start another one. And just having to redo it, and it's incredibly frustrating. So if I can save somebody some time and frustration, then I feel like I've already accomplished my mission here. So to do that, to kind of save yourself from having to, that's what the tips and stuff that I talk about, is just to save you from basically spending hours and then looking at it and thinking, why doesn't this look good? Or being able to evaluate, like when something's not looking right. So part of it for me is there's a lot of stuff that you're not really gonna learn until you just do it, and then learn, and then you'll know. So I just call it kind of tips, and it's just based on experience, but like I understand that sometimes you're not gonna know stuff until you actually just do it. And on top of that, that's where you get a lot of your the style, so to speak, or like your voice, or like what's interesting about your work, is just through the trial and error. But I also know that it can be frustrating to like work on something and then not know like why it's not working. So like I said, I use this pen as much as possible, so I'll do darks like that. See? Because this is sort of my midpoint, kind of my, like the overall look. And so I can always go darker, I can use a brush pen, or I'll do like lighter like this, where like I just lightly, but if I really wanted to, like make it look lighter, I have my pen in my mouth. So you have to get the fine liner sort of going, but you can see how finer, hence the fine liner, it can be. But if you do this everywhere, then it just kind of, it makes it look muddy. So that's the thing with pen and ink. I like it because it's demanding, and I like that because it teaches you a lot about values, and honestly a lot of color is, there's no real like rule. I mean, if you're talking about art, but values can really be, if you don't understand that, then it can really like not look good. And also drawing is really line and shape. Sometimes if your line and shape is strong, it'll save the picture. I mean, a lot of times that's really what's messing it up, is it's not drawn well. But also values, if it's not, it can look muddy, for example, or the focal point, it doesn't look interesting. That's the other thing too, and that has to do with composition. So one thing, like something like this, at this point it's about just kind of unifying the page. And so when you're going in to add, or as I'm going in to add this, I also think about, like, that's 5 minutes, I'll start another one. I'll also think about like the language that I had already set up, like the texture. So if I'm saying that this is a certain texture, then this is kind of like a reference to that, or I use that as reference. So part of what happened with me was that I never really got to consistently work on the fundamentals, like, because, and that can be kind of the problem with when you start doing freelance or something kind of like that, like working on a professionally, if you will, is that you kind of get stuck doing a certain thing, and you can get really good at that specific thing, but then you're missing the, when you go do something else, then you'll find like what you're missing. And if you get the opportunity to work on it, that's good too, to work on the fundamentals or the gaps in your knowledge. But I never really had that, and so recently, because of this channel and having the opportunity to do that, like, I've really gotten clearer basically about like the fundamental stuff. So really I'm just kind of working on the eye flow without creating more work for myself. It's kind of the gist of it here. I mean, I prefer when everything's not all exactly the same level of detail. I think it's kind of not necessary. But just speaking of comics, I used to have, like I mentioned, thousands, and I had complete like collections of certain comics and stuff, and I'm not going to go into what happened, but I ended up, now the only comic I have is Berserk, and I have the 3rd volume, and I just happened to like buy that a while back. But that's like the only comic I actually own, other than just looking up stuff online. So that's kind of my reference not really, but if I wanted to see like an actual comic, I guess. I mean, they did a good job like, of publishing it, but I mean, I would say it's an influence, but it was sort of after the fact, because I had already wanted to do something similar, and then I discovered it sort of later, by the time it started to become more known, more famous. And then I saw it and I thought, yeah, like that was pretty similar, or pretty cool. I mean, there's a lot of differences too, but also similar in the sense that it's dark fantasy. And kind of the same thing with Game of Thrones. Like I've done freelance for Game of Thrones, and I worked on the card game when it first came out, and it wasn't like that popular at the time, but it was starting to become popular, like the book series. And when I first started working on it, George R.R. Martin actually was emailing, because he wasn't so famous back then, so he was like emailing the illustrators working on it. That's 5 minutes. Not all the time, but like he said, if we had questions, it was kind of a standard email to everyone. But yeah, that was before the show. But it was kind of the same thing, where it had similarities to what I was kind of going for, like the grittiness. But he did a good job of that part. But yeah, like I'm not wanting to do... I have issues with Game of Thrones. I like it. I mean, I read it up until like maybe the 3rd book. But I'm not trying to do... like I feel like it's a little too realistic, if you want to call it that, for like a fantasy setting, even though it has like a lot of the... I mean, like the whole point of it, it's subverting the genre kind of thing, but like I like things about it, but like I'm not trying to do something like that. And also, now that I'm working on this comic, it's also kind of clarifying how I want, because I want to write novels. But and like I said, this isn't, like I said before, like this isn't really an actual scenario that I plotted out. This was just for fun. So I'm going to use a fine liner for this guy. So by doing this, it blends him into the to the background a little bit more, and you don't want to do that with everything, is what I'm saying, because otherwise it looks muddy. So you kind of have to decide where you want to, and you kind of have to do it, because this is basically gray. You're graying it out. What was I saying? But yeah, this kind of helps to develop the character and the world and stuff. Like in the story, there's not really gonna be like some over-the-top undead sorcerer, but maybe, I don't know. But that's okay. I mean, there could be, it could change. But that kind of plays into the magic system, which I'm still thinking about. the main thing is you actually have to like not make things gimmicky. Like you have to actually care about like what it is you're creating. Like as far as that's my guideline for myself, and not do something because like it's a gimmick or that you think it's clever, like, but actually care about, at least for me, like I have to care about. That's kind of why I ended up doing sort of this indie comic stuff or indie story, like my own kind of stuff, because like after a while you get tired of working on other people's ideas. I mean, you want to work on your own idea. Let's work on this part a little bit. But you can see where I like to bring everything up to the same level so that it doesn't look like one part is so much less finished, and that kind of kills your motivation. Especially if you're at this point where like, yeah, like you're wanting to finish the page. Now I would like to do color, like a color comic. I think I would like to do both. And I'm actually not trying to do a bunch of comics either. So there's that. Like in my mind, I'm thinking I'll do, that's 5 minutes. I'll just keep the timer going. You might be drawing along or just listening or tuned out by this point. Yeah, I keep thinking I want to do like a prologue kind of thing. Also, the other thing, and I kind of mentioned this in a past video, where one, this is kind of a style guide, and I know some people just kind of want to draw a comic, even if it's not for an extended period of time, like they wouldn't mind, or if they're like commissioned to do it, like they just want to draw a comic, especially if it's something that starts to get known. I mean, I went through a phase like that too, where I really just kind of like what I was saying about the Game of Thrones stuff. Like I just wanted to illustrate. That was my focus, and it helps a lot because it teaches you how to be professional about it and get paid for your work and have deadlines and stuff like that. So I actually did that quite a bit. So that was mostly what my professional art work was. But yeah, I mean, you kind of reach a point where, and then after that, I guess there's just a little bit of background about me. And then after that, I ended up working at non-art related, and that's kind of why I developed the 5-minute timer thing for myself, because I'd come home and just not have energy to do art. But like if I didn't do it, I would just feel like something was missing. And so I just did it for 5 minutes. And that's basically one. And like I said also in another video, which was again kind of a personal thing, but I lost all my, or had to get rid of all of my, which is I guess the same as losing all of my sketchbooks. And so it was hard to even like get back into it because it was triggering like negative feelings. And so yeah, to get back into it, I actually started doing 1-minute sessions, and it was kind of a way to heal, as it were. And then I moved to 5 minutes, which then when I started doing the originally doing the channel, which was a couple of years ago is when I actually started, there were times where I could really only do 5 minutes of sketching, and on top of that, like, record a video. But I think with me, I like to challenge myself. I mean, up to a certain point, I mean, I think it's kind of good. Not to the point where, like, you're hurting yourself, but, like, it's kind of up to you to decide how much challenge. But, I'm sort of thinking ahead with stuff like that. Like, I kind of, for example, when I first started the channel, I knew that I wanted to work on my drawing ability. Like, my thing is, I know I could, like, I knew I could draw, but, like, it wasn't consistent, and that's what bothered me. It's because I was lacking the practice, I was lacking the, and also, like, like, practicing the fundamentals, basically. Like, there were things that were getting in the way. But I knew, like, that I could get a good picture. So when I started recording it, that was another challenge, because I thought, well, and so I didn't say anything, I just kind of recorded. And so I realized, like, okay, that was about getting over the recording part of it. And now I've pretty much gotten to the point where I can just kind of talk and draw. And I do think it's more interesting to see, like, inking than pencil. I think it's kind of boring to watch penciling. I mean, I think there's a time and place for any kind of video, really. That's 5 minutes. I'm not really sure how long it's been. Oh, I can look at the, yeah, it's been about 40 minutes. I mean, I feel like I've already made pretty good progress. I did want to go buy some pens, but I'd have to go to the art store. My schedule these days is well, these videos are becoming longer, so they take longer to not only record, but also to upload and stuff. And so I'll do this and then do other stuff, and then usually do some more art in the evening. And I was actually wanting to work on this last night, and I thought I would do it before I went to sleep, but because I had all this energy, like creative energy to work on it, like wanting to finish it, like motivation, but then I couldn't relax enough to actually sit down, because you can't, like, one thing is, if you have a lot of creative energy, it can be bad, because then you sort of force trying to finish the picture, the artwork, and end up being unhappy with it, end up having to fix it or something. And so I thought, okay, well, I'll go to sleep early and then wake up early and do it that way, like in the middle of the night. But then I ended up sleeping the whole night, and I'm glad, because I feel like I have more focus. So part of what, like, why I call this like an experiment or a test is because there's like things like this that I'm kind of just seeing, like how to render in pen and ink, different effects that could work. And so this is a low pressure way. So yeah, I would recommend, if you're wanting to work on a comic, your own comic, to to kind of find a way to do it sort of low pressure enough to where you can experiment with different effects. So I was recommended a brush pen, which I'm gonna look into. I might have to order it. But I like brush pens. And yeah, I was cleaning my art supplies and I don't even know where I got it, but I have this beginner set of, I think it's called Sumi E or whatever, like the Japanese inking. And it had a booklet, but it looks kind of fun. I don't know if there's ink in there, if it will even work. I think it had some brushes, so I'll use those. I do have a bottle of ink somewhere, which may still work. Plus I have the acrylic paints that I bought just to get into that. That's 5 minutes. This may be the longest video. I'll get towards an hour. I'll kind of think about that. Have that be the goal. Also, I'm left-handed, so I do smear the ink, and I know that there are kind of ways to, I just got used to working that way. I mean, like, you could do a sketchbook the opposite way, but it's just too weird to me. I can't do it. And also, like, yeah, like working from right to left. So at this point, you kind of just have to look at like, I'm kind of going off of this, but it doesn't mean it always has to have the same rendering. Like, you can kind of leave it like it's all about the eye flow and stuff. And that just comes from experience, just kind of, I've said it several times. I usually, or not usually, but many times, I've overworked just because I like working with ink, and so it's pretty easy to overwork. And usually the overwork is like you took away something that was looking good by rendering it. So I also have said, like, less is more. It really is. It's better to, like, I like this area, but it needs more work. But if you just kind of start to render it, it just, you took away what was good about it. And so, again, that's just like an experience thing where you kind of know, like, alarm bells kind of go off. Like, it's better to leave it less rendered and still have, like, the goodness. I mean, it could be argued that maybe you would get better results if you just weren't talking, like if I weren't talking and just kind of working. But that's not necessarily true, because the thing with drawing and with art, because with my freelance stuff, it was not really drawing, it was painting. I was doing digital art, and just spending time on it in and of itself does not make it look good, like if you're not really sure what you're doing. But then there's the whole thing of sometimes you'll come up with something really good just by spontaneity. And so that was just kind of like the challenge, was where's the line between just kind of plugging away at it and then coming up with something really great, and like you couldn't even do it again if you wanted, versus playing it safe and just coming up with something pretty boring and standard and like not memorable. Because it just depends on what you're wanting to accomplish. I mean, art, you're not always trying to make your stuff be that memorable. Maybe you're just wanting to paint or to draw, like for yourself, or just paint something nice. And that's fine. My thing is, if I'm going to do a comic, I mean, I want people to remember it. And if I'm going to do something like this, but yeah, I mean, sometimes I just want to draw like a nice picture. I'm not trying to make it the most original thing ever. But I just feel like, yeah, I mean, if you're going to tell a story or like create something like this, then you probably want it to be memorable, I would think. So that's another 5 minutes. Let's start another one. We're at 52 minutes on this one. I'm gonna work on this part and probably do an hour video. So I mentioned that I would like to add color, but not to, if I were going to add color, I wouldn't necessarily maybe shade it like as much, although you could add color to this and it would look okay. Plus you could make the lines lighter. There's all kinds of things which I would have to experiment with. But that's why, like, sometimes you can kind of leave an open, sort of don't render that because you might color it kind of thing. The other thing is that I'm still getting used to how I want these videos to be. Like, this type of video is kind of my favorite, where I want to be able to just listen to somebody and also know that if I wanted to watch what they were doing, like see what they're doing, it would be interesting enough. But that it's not just about that. But then I also know that more kind of instructional or tutorial type stuff is good too, and I'll keep doing those. So it's kind of a mix. And then also there's the thing of doing comics is kind of, I mean, I had it in mind, but like I've just now started to really get into it again. The last comic I actually like worked on, like drew, was another original like idea, but it was sci-fi, more like that kind of thing, more like Dune, which is that's like the other topic that I could spend a while talking about, because like the first Dune book is actually one of my favorite books, probably my favorite book. But yeah, I have like stories about that, because it did take me a few attempts to even start, like, finish reading it. I started it and I wasn't ready for it. My mind was not awakened enough. And then I ended up reading it a few years later and loved it. But yeah, this was before like this was back when it was just like the 80s version that you could look at, and that was it's a weird movie. But it had some cool things about it, but also pretty weird. But yeah, we won't get into Dune right now. But the other comic, like I was saying, was it was more sort of like that. But if all I could like make progress on is this sort of story with these characters that I have talked about in the RPG origin video, then that would be alright, because it's a pretty big story. So yeah, that's the other thing too, is if you're working on big projects, you kind of have to have a certain mentality of knowing like when you can. So this is kind of like a sprint to the finish line, but also realizing that this is a test comic, and so the comic itself would be like a marathon, like, but it's good to kind of have something to like a milestone or a stepping stone. So that's yet another 5 minutes, and I'll start to wrap this up. I feel like I made pretty good progress if you compare it to the beginning of the video. I got about this far. I mean, it needs a little bit more work, but really not too much, because I'm just comparing it to this, and I don't want this to be so much more finished than this one. And then as I wrap this up, yeah, like I was saying, I'll do probably my next video. We'll talk about so I did a video where I sketched this, that is a thumbnail, and then kind of anticipating how I would do other comics, I went ahead and kind of just laid out the page. But in the future, I probably won't, like if I were actually working on a real comic for my story, I would do it on a loose. But as far as like the size of it, like I'm okay with that, because I feel like I can get pretty detailed with the pen, and then if I really wanted to zoom in when I scan it, I mean, you can zoom in pretty far. Plus I might color it, so we'll see. But yeah, in the next video I'll probably just lay it out with pencil, because I think that would make it easier, but also show you kind of, because the whole thing of penciling it really detailed and then inking it is really for like an inker to ink your pencils. But if you're the one inking it anyway, you don't need to do all of that. But that'll be for another video. But yeah, I want to thank you for joining me today. If you sat through a whole hour, that's awesome. Or just maybe watch it in bits and pieces. But yeah, thank you, and thank you for supporting the channel. And until next time, keep on sketching.